You guys are going to love this. You guys are getting a huge ping. You guys are getting a huge ping because, well, I just got a ping, but you guys are getting a huge ping because I forgot to start recording this till just now. So all of that was a freebie, but it was only for the Facebook Live folks. So that's on me to you. That's a free gift. Take it for what you will. Look, here's the thing. Studies are showing that the more connected we are in this world does not necessarily mean that we feel more connected. This is true not only because of technology, but it is also true the older we get. The older we get, we tend to get busier, studies show, and we tend to allow things that keep us busy to get between us and being connected to others. And things like technology, which seem on their face to be something that connects us all that well, may have us interacting more, but not connecting as much. As a matter of fact, dramatically less. So we're making a distinction here between interaction and connection. Interaction and connection. Interaction is the back and forth, the ping pong of witty repartee, or look how pretty my life looks like, or what are you doing, or here's a picture of my lunch, versus connection, which is that authentic, that intimate, that vulnerable, which can be very hard to do in places like social media or over email, or in a world where people are looking more inward and spend most of their time inward at home in front of a screen than they do outward in community. Studies also show that isolation and a sense of loneliness can increases your mortality rate. So there's a huge risk to this. And as I posted in a blog post a couple of months ago, it's a dramatic increase, especially for men. It's a dramatic increase as we get older to risk of suicide, a sense of loneliness and isolation, which is also, for the most part, self-imposed. So, you know, high level of impact of not managing our mindset around loneliness and about being connected and about being in relationship. So I am super psyched. I want to jump in. I want to make a difference here. I want this to be something that you take away that either provides you some insight or you find something that's actionable. Please ping me with questions or comments. I'd love to know tell me about how you manage when you're lonely. What do you do? What do you do for yourself? What do you do to manage your loneliness? I notice as a dad that I sometimes feel lonely when I'm at home with my kids, with my wife. And a lot of the times is because when I'm home, I am authentically myself, but I'm also concurrently dad. And so I'm living an intentional life about who I am as a father for my kids and what kind of example I want to set. And I'm also being there for my wife, and she's being there for me as a spouse. And sometimes those can feel like roles that we're playing. And some days they don't feel as authentic, and it feels like, there's some stuff that's going on with me that I just doesn't serve anyone to talk about right now. And sometimes that can make me feel really lonely until I find a space where I can share it or figure out a way to share it appropriately if it's with my kids, or a time and space to share it with my wife when we can be together about it. And creating that space, it's really a calling to create that space. Loneliness, I'm going to make an assertion here. Loneliness has nothing to do with being alone. Loneliness has nothing to do with being alone. Loneliness has nothing to do with whether you're with other people or not. It can happen anywhere, anytime. Very often, in my experience, the times we feel most lonely is when we're embarking on something that's unfamiliar, something that's new. So consider this. When you try something new, not only is it unfamiliar, but it can be a little bit scary. And I don't care if it's just, going to volunteer at a soup kitchen where they're just going to tell you what to do, including peeling potatoes and washing pots. If it's unfamiliar, if it's daunting, if there's stuff you feel like you're going to have to say, do, that you can't either predict or you don't have an experience of, those are reasons that you can experience loneliness. It's unfamiliar, it's uncomfortable. It seems like there's so much that you don't know. There are going to be new people and new surroundings. You may be worried about screwing it up. So when you embark on something new, it's not uncommon to have an experience of that as, wow, I feel really lonely, even though I'm amongst all these people. It's completely normal. And as an entrepreneur and as a father, it seems to double down all the time. Like my kids keep growing and they keep going into these new developmental stages where they keep pushing back in new and special ways. They seem to be ninjas about about how to push buttons. We deal with issues that, today that we didn't have to deal with 3 months ago, and they're going to be in 3 months from now, we're going to be dealing with issues then. So there's always constantly something new. As an entrepreneur, I'm constantly learning new things. And that constantly has me on a steep learning curve. And sometimes that can make me feel lonely. I want to share with you when we first moved to Bainbridge Island. So when I moved to Bainbridge Island, where I live now, I had spent a decade living in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And in Santa Fe, New Mexico, we'd spent a decade there. 300 days of sun a year. 300 days of sun a year. And we moved to Washington State, the home of the dark and the gray during the winter, to 300 days of very often overcast at the time. It's actually, the weather's getting better. And it was a massive transition. We went from these wide open vista landscapes to all these trees that are 100 feet tall. It was beautiful, but it was so drastically different than everything we'd experienced. Not only that, I moved here without a job. And it had been an intentional move. We decided to move here, and we were really committed to moving now that our daughter was born, and we wanted to find a new space for ourselves. So I moved with a wife who's a full-time mom, a baby daughter, 2 dogs, a U-Haul full of stuff, and no job. Talk about feeling lonely. There were times after my daughter and my wife went to bed at night when it was just me and the dogs, when there was actually real despair. Like, what am I going to do? How am I going to make this work? What was I thinking? What comes next? What if it all goes sideways, right? You notice that you can get into that loop, that whirlpool. If you've ever felt that, right? Like you get that one negative thought and then it starts to lasso into another one. Give me a thumbs up if you've noticed that. If you ever had an experience of that. So here's the thing. There's a risk, right? The risk is if we sit with it and let it just show up and passively, don't mind me, folks, forgot to turn off my cell phone. Evidently, I'm getting phone calls today. So here's the thing. If we don't step in the way of that thought when we notice it, it's going to probably run the gambit. See, our brain's super curious and it wants to fix things. So it wants to figure stuff out. And very often it will look around to see, is this true? Is it not true? And it will start to line up to see if there's evidence that you're lonely. And I guarantee you, your brain will find some evidence that you're lonely and that there are problems in your world. It has a tendency to take on this life of its own. So we have this opportunity when we notice it to do something different. Notes, folks. I still new at this, still making it up as I go along. And I want to share with you that, like, if we notice it, there's a ton we can do, not the least of which is to step in front of it. We don't have to be passive participants in how it goes for us. We can actually step in front of the conversation and make a difference, not only in the long run, which is what we'd all like to, but in the moment. There's a ton of things that we can do. Some of them is an awareness, and some of them are some of them. So some of them are awareness oriented and some of them are action oriented. So I want to start with the awareness oriented stuff. First thing is that loneliness is a feeling. It's a powerful feeling. But loneliness is a feeling. It's not who you are. Loneliness is a feeling and it's an experience of loneliness, but it doesn't define you and it doesn't necessarily mean anything. It's not uncommon to feel lonely. It's not uncommon to feel lonely when you're trying something new, when something's shifted, or when you're up against something that's pushing back against you. There are different ways that you can start to shift your experience of it, not the least of which is starting to take a look at what you're grateful for. Like, consider this. This is a Post-it thing. This is a Post-it or a journal or a pad of paper, anything you want. If you grab a piece of paper and write down 10 things and force yourself up to come up with 10 things that you're grateful for. Oh, totally grateful I have heat on this cold day. Grateful that there's coffee in the house. I'm grateful that my dog is snoring in the corner. I'm grateful that my parents love me. I'm grateful that I have friends who care enough about me to reach out. What are 10 things that you can write down that you're grateful for? We're actually forcing our brain to look at something different. We're actually asking our brain to look at something different and create a different experience for ourselves. And it can actually shift the way you see yourself right now. And we want, there's a piece about getting outside of your current experience. Get outside of your current experience. If your experience is, oh, I'm being totally dragged into by a thought of loneliness, what is it that you can do to take yourself outside of that experience? There are some really great ways to do it. Personally, I love to read self-improvement books. I love to do those. I try and start my day doing those. Big shout out to Michael Cinquino, who posted about this just last week and got me recharged about that. Right now I'm reading a book called The Four Agreements. If you've read that, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. That's a great book. I'd love to know if you're reading a self-improvement book, what that book is. You can put it in the comments below. So a lot of it is reading, because sometimes that will shift the way you're seeing and get your brain focusing on something else. Sometimes it might be a self-improvement book. For you, it might just be fiction. What is it that can shift your experience right now? You can do things as simple as watching a movie, although that's not my first choice. And I think that's kind of a passive way of participating and doesn't require you to move your brain. But for some people, it works really well. Also, you can change your location. It could be as simple as moving from the kitchen to your office. It can be as simple as moving from your house to a coffee shop. It can be as simple as going to the next town over to go work from somewhere else. I have a friend of mine that I'm connected to on Facebook, Katya. She was in a total slump. She was professionally in a total slump. She didn't know what she was doing. It seemed dire. And she was connected to somebody who was halfway across the country in Minnesota. And what she said was, I'm flat out. And so she connected with him and she said, I want to fly to where you are and spend a week with you and do nothing but work together and just hang out together. I just need to change my location. And he said, sure, come on out. And they spent an entire week. Now, their work is entrepreneurship. And what they did was she said, I shifted my location and thousands of things opened up that by no means would ever have predictably happened if I hadn't been willing to just jump outside of everything that I'm doing. So that's another thing you can do. Jump on a plane, jump on a boat, jump on a train. Go to that place that you've always wanted to. Go to some place you have no idea where you're going and figure it out once you get there. If nothing else, it'll give you an experience of something that you hadn't experienced before. Find new places to go. Find new events in your local community. There's some great online resources, and there are also some brick and mortar resources. You can go to places like meetup.com or eventbrite.com and start taking a look at the events and presentations that are going on around there. You can also take a look at your public library. Very often they have workshops and talks. Yoga studios are also great for that. Local adult education facilities will do that, as will local community colleges. So take a look and see what activities. You can go look at your Chamber of Commerce. Your Chamber of Commerce often produces events and creates social events. Also, there are lots of different things you can do. You can take a look at where you can Google things that interest you. Like, oh my gosh, I love steampunk fiction. Cool. Try steampunk in your city and see what shows up. Who knows? Maybe there's a meetup somewhere. Maybe there's a group of enthusiasts. Well, I'm a runner. Well, great. Go do the running piece. Or, find some other interest that you have. I love astronomy, or I've always loved astronomy, but I don't know anything about it. I love photography. I've always thought about getting into gardening. Those are all seeds of inspiration. Those are all seeds of inspiration that you get to choose whether to jump into or not. try using what we call, in our house, we call it the Great Oracle. Try choosing the Great Oracle and, jump into Google and Google your location and gardening classes, or your location and whatever you're interested in. Volunteer. Volunteer is an awesome way to do it. So as an entrepreneur and as a dad, and often as a spouse, I often find that my job is to be the decision maker and the knower. And very often I like that. And I think that's probably why I went into entrepreneurship, is right. Like, it's my job to make the decisions, make the distinctions, and then jump into them. It's what it often leaves me with is decision fatigue. It leaves me with decision fatigue. Like, I don't know do I have to make this decision too? What I notice is when I volunteer, my job is to show up and let somebody else tell me what to do. And I love that sometimes. Show up and just tell me what to do. Great. We would like you to greet people and do name tags. Okay, I can do this job. Okay, it's like a 3-hour shift. That's not a problem. I love that. It's simple. I don't have to do anything else. I just sit my bum in a chair and fill out name tags. Makes it, like I can make small talk all day doing that. And very often you find yourself sitting next to somebody else who's also responsible for that with not much to do. And you can strike up a conversation and you end up meeting new people this way. Whew. Next one is critical for me, and I know most people who have struggled with this have added some of this regimen into their world, and that's around moving your body. There is so much great evidence around exercise and physically moving your body having a dramatically positive impact on your mental outlook in the world, whether that's swimming or walking or jogging or running or any of the thousands of different ways you can move your body, physically move your body. I saw this actually happen when I was just back east. My mother, who I went to go back to see, she's in her early 80s. She's unbelievable, and she has made such a difference in my life. And she is in an assisted living facility, and we made plans to go to the museum, her favorite museum in the world. It's the Museum of Fine Arts. If you've ever been there in Boston, you must go. It's the most awesome museum. And we went, and she was a little hesitant too. She hadn't been out in a while, like weeks, and she was very used to how life went at the assisted living facility. But we loaded up in the car. We took the time. We went. We got special parking so we could be right out front, and we got her up there, and we went through the museum together, and we ended up spending like 3 hours going through the museum and having lunch. And I watched this amazing woman blossom from being outside of what her experience was, where she was struggling before. Now there was new light in her eyes. There was new excitement in what was possible. There was new interest and new ideas. Move your body. She walked all the way through the museum. It was incredibly heartening to see. Lots of things you can do. Get a camera. Get a camera. Your phone has a camera in it. Go take some beautiful pictures. Talk to people about beautiful pictures that you're taking. Go to a coffee shop and compliment somebody on their scarf, their tie, their shoes, the quality of coffee, the weather. You might want to stay away from politics and news. Just saying. If nothing else, it starts something. And even if you don't think you do it well, these are people in a coffee shop. You may never see them again. So there's a super low risk to doing it. Go sit at the community table. Go stand at the coffee bar. Try not to isolate yourself at your own table. Another place to do is to reach out to existing resources. Who are those close friends, those male friends, those female friends who know you better than any? The ones who you can say, that one or two people you can say anything to and they won't judge you, and they'll totally just listen to whatever you have to say. Those are the people to reach out to. Talk with them. Reach out to them. Tell them what's going on in your experience. They don't necessarily need to fix it. You just need to share it. The one thing I know, this is so from experience, The one thing I know is that we don't often generate our breakthroughs by ourselves. It often happens in experience. It often comes in conversation. We actually generate ourselves differently. We resolve issues that exist for us in conversation. So having that person you can reach out to, having that old friend you can call and say, things are going sideways for me. I'm totally freaked out. Do you have a couple of minutes? I can just chat with you about it. I don't need you to fix me or anything. I just need to tell somebody about it. There's no reason to suffer about this. There is no reason to suffer about this. Everybody struggles with loneliness. You may find that your friend that you share this conversation with shares with you their story of loneliness. And that can make all the difference. And there are tons of resources. If you can't think of that friend or you're just not comfortable, there are tons of resources also out there that you can go to. Everything from counselors and therapists and coaches. There are lots of professional resources as well. But whatever resource you choose, whichever one works best for you, that's the one I would recommend for you. Look, we together can step in the way. We together can step in the way of loneliness. And sometimes there's a time to step in front of it, and sometimes there's not. So I want to talk about this just for a sec. Loneliness is a feeling, and very often it's one that we do not want to experience, and we try and do something to not have it. But if you allow it to be, if you breathe into it, and just breathe into the loneliness and just let it wash over you. We have this inherent fear that if we did that, it would never stop. And yet it always does, right? Like we've all been lonely before and it's all gone away sometimes, even when it's an overwhelming feel of loneliness. But by allowing it, very often it just lets itself go, and then we get back to whatever we were up to in our lives. So that's always my first recommendation, is just let it be. Allow it to be and see if that resolves it. If not, we get to step in the way of it. There are things we can do that are predictable producers of a difference for you. I'm curious, if you see something that is predictable, hey, for all those people who are just showing up now and you're watching the recorded event, thanks for being here, because very often no shout outs for those folks. So what are the things that you know that will take you out of that rut, that loneliness rut? For me, the coffee shop is a great example. For me, being able to go to a place where I don't know anybody, can go get a coffee and chat up a few of the people who are at the coffee shop, totally opens up a new venue, because we end up having a conversation I can't predict. We end up having a conversation about whatever shows up. And all of a sudden we're like, oh, wow, I don't feel lonely anymore. You literally can make a difference in a moment by stepping in the way of your loneliness. So big shout out, forgot to put this in the front side, but I'm going to put it in the back side right now. So excited that we've released the Hero's Guide to Fatherhood. If you bump your way on over to www.heroicfatherhood.com, you can pick up your Hero's Guide to Fatherhood. And I also invite you to scoot on over to the Facebook group, the private group called Heroic Fatherhood, and come join me over there. I'm going to be transitioning my content over the next weeks and months over there, and you're going to see a lot more resources over there. So I invite you to come and join me over there. And if you like this, give me a thumbs up. If you feel like it provided value for you, feel free to share it. And I will look forward to seeing you guys next week in what I think is going to be week 4 of the 90 Days Be My Boss Challenge. All right, take care. Have a great day.